Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into something important, how artificial intelligence is shaking up assessment in health professions education.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. And our main guide here is the new AME guide, number 178, just came out this year, actually. It's called Artificial Intelligence in Health Professions Education Assessment.
Exactly. So what we want to do for you today is basically boil this down. We'll hit the key ideas, the potential, the cool stuff AI might do.
But also the real challenges.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want you to walk away with a solid handle on this
Yeah.
without feeling totally overwhelmed. It's kind of your fast track.
Precisely. The guide itself is aimed at helping everyone involved, educators, institutions, maybe even learners, figure out this whole AI and assessment thing.
And look, this matters to you if you want to get up to speed quickly on something that's, well, changing fast. We'll point out some surprising bits, some practical takeaways.
Things you can actually think about applying. Yeah. Stuff that's relevant to the future of how we train healthcare pros. Okay, so let's jump in. The guide starts off strong, saying needs a solid footing.
Uh-huh. Not just tech for tech's sake. It's got to be grounded in, actual pedagogical theory.
Right. And they bring up a couple of frameworks straight away. First one is TPAC.
Yeah, TPAC, that's technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. The idea is you can't just know the tech or just the teaching methods or just the subject.
You need all three working together.
Exactly. How does the technology actually enhance the teaching of this specific content? That's the core question TPAC pushes us to ask.
Makes sense. It's about synergy. And the other one mentioned is PICRAT. How does that fit in?
So PICRAT is interesting because it looks at things from two angles, the learner and the educator. For the learner, you've got PIC, passive, interactive, creative.
Okay, break that down. Passive is like.
Like maybe AI just tracks how long you spend on a module. Pretty basic engagement. Interactive is where you're, actually doing something with the AI.
Like an AI asking you questions, maybe.
Yeah, or an AI-driven Socratic dialogue adapting to your answers. And then creative is where the learner uses AI as a tool themselves, generating summaries, maybe getting feedback drafts.
So the learner becomes more active as you go from P to I to C?
Exactly. And then for the educator, there's RAT, replacement, amplification, transformation.
Okay.
Replacement sounds straightforward.
Yeah, using AI for tasks humans used to do, like generating simple MCQs or maybe initial grading on some things. Amplification is using AI to make current methods better.
Better how? Like more personalized feedback.
Could be. Or maybe getting deeper analytics on student performance from an existing assessment type. And transformation, well, that's the big one.
Doing totally new things.
Right. Things that just weren't possible before AI, like analyzing massive amounts of learning data to truly personalize pathways or identify system-level issues. It's about fundamentally changing assessment.
So PICRAT gives us this spectrum, huh? From simple substitution to really rethinking things.
Pretty much. It helps frame how deep the integration goes. Okay, that's helpful context. The guide also talks about bigger assessment frameworks, like programmatic assessment.
Right. Moving beyond just single tests. Programmatic assessment is about collecting lots of different assessment pieces over time. Low stakes, high stakes, observations, tests.
To get a more rounded, holistic view of competence.
Exactly. A whole picture. And that connects to the competency-based medical education framework, CBME. It has these core components.
Let me see if I remember. Clear outcomes, right? Like competencies.
Yep. Articulated outcomes. Then sequencing those outcomes progressively.
Tailored learning experiences.
Competency-focused instruction and bringing it all together. Programmatic assessment. Those 5 pieces.
It's all about ensuring they can do what's needed. And Bloom's taxonomy gets a mention too. How does that fit with AI?
Well, Bloom's helps you think about the level of thinking you're assessing, from basic recall up to creating something new.
So you can use AI tools to target different levels.
Precisely. You could use AI for simple recall quizzes, sure, but also potentially for tasks that require higher order skills like analysis or evaluation, depending on how you design the assessment. It helps align the AI tool with the learning goal.
Got it. The guide also gives some practical pointers for educators using AI best practices.
Yeah, really important stuff like ensuring learner anonymity where possible, protecting privacy.
And tackling bias.
Definitely. Being transparent about how the AI works, trying to spot and reduce algorithmic bias, that's key.
And telling students AI is being used.
Absolutely. Be explicit. And crucially, encourage learners to be critical of AI outputs. Don't just accept them. Model that critical evaluation yourself.
So transparency and critical thinking are central. Okay, now, how are people actually reacting to all this AI stuff in assessment? Students, faculty, it's not all smooth sailing, is it?
No, not at all. The guide points out it's really varied. You've got real enthusiasm on one side and quite a bit of caution or even fear on the other. Both learners and educators feel this mix.
And that thing about anthropomorphizing AI, treating it like a person.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point. We tend to give AI human traits, like gender, especially with systems like the newer ChatGPT versions with voices.
Right, you forget it's code underneath.
Exactly. And the guide warns that attributing human qualities can cloud our judgment about what AI actually is and what it can realistically do. It's a tool, not a colleague.
And this can lead to misuse, right? Both the hype and the fear.
Totally. Overenthusiasm might lead to deploying tools that aren't ready or suitable. And fear can lead to things like over-relying on AI detectors, which
aren't very accurate, generally.
often not, yeah. They can be biased, inaccurate. It's a real problem.
Yeah.
But there are legitimate concerns, too.
Like what are the big worries people have?
Well, learners worry about losing skills, becoming too reliant on AI or using it inappropriately, ethically. Faculty might worry about their roles changing or even being replaced in some ways.
And learners worrying about being wrongly accused by those detectors?
Big time. That anxiety is real. Imagine your original work getting flagged.
Yeah, that would be awful. So how does the guide suggest dealing with all these reactions?
Open discussion is key. Talking about it, educators, learners, institutions, and grounding AI use in those pedagogical frameworks we talk about, like TPAC and PICRAT.
Having a clear why can help reduce fear.
Exactly. Explaining the educational rationale, being transparent. It helps build trust and manage expectations.
Okay, let's shift gears to specific assessment types. The guide talks about personalized and flexible summative assessment. High-stakes stuff. What's the idea there?
Well, HPE is moving towards more flexible curricula anyway, right? Letting learners progress at different paces.
Right, competency-based progression.
So AI could potentially enable more personalized, maybe even on-demand, summative assessments. You demonstrate competence, you move on, not just based on time served.
Assessment tailored to the individual's readiness.
That's the vision, allowing learners to finish phases or get certified when they are ready based on solid evidence of competence.
What are the supposed benefits? Faster feedback, more objectivity.
Potentially, yes. AI could offer real-time feedback, even in summative settings, and maybe reduce some of the human greater variability or bias.
But there must be downsides, or at least cautions.
Oh, for sure. The guide warns we could risk focusing too much on narrow, easily measured skills and miss the bigger picture, holistic development, clinical reasoning nuances.
The stuff that's harder to quantify.
Exactly. And then there are the usual suspects, data privacy concerns, potential for bias in the AI algorithms themselves, and just the sheer resources needed to implement this well.
And again, it has to be driven by educational need, not just the tech availability.
Always. That's a constant theme.
Okay, now how does all this personalization square with the need for standardization in assessment? Things like licensing exams, USMLE?
Yeah, that's a major tension. Standardized tests are bedrock, right? For fairness, consistency, making sure everyone meets a minimum standard. Public trust depends on it.
But personalized assessment seems to pull in the opposite direction.
It does. Precision education wants tailoring. Standardization demands uniformity. Finding the balance is tricky.
So where does generative AI, Gen AI, fit into standardized tests? Can it just write exam questions for us?
Not so fast. The guide is pretty cautious here for high-stakes use. Standardized tests go through incredibly rigorous validation psychometrics, item response theory.
Making sure questions are fair, reliable, measure the right thing.
Exactly. And AI-generated questions just haven't cleared those hurdles yet. Plus, some Gen AI is a bit of a black box. We don't always know how it arrived at an answer or a question. That's problematic for high-stakes validation.
So using those free online MCQ generators for a licensing exam, probably not a good idea.
Definitely not yet. The guide points out that current LLMs aren't consistently reliable enough for high-stakes item generation without significant human oversight and review. The quality control isn't there.
But maybe Gen AI could help with standardization in other ways, like in OSCEs.
Yes, that's a really interesting potential application. You could use speech to text to capture the interaction in an OSCE.
And then have AI analyze the transcript against a rubric.
Precisely. Fine-tuned LLMs, trained on specific rubrics and examples of good and bad performance, are showing promise in improving scoring consistency across different sites or examiners. It could reduce variability.
That sounds genuinely useful for making OSCEs more objective, but still, for the big decisions.
Human oversight is still critical. The human-in-the-loop approach is essential for high-stakes assessment right now. AI can assist, but humans need to review, validate, and make the final calls.
So for now, AI's sweet spot might be more in the lower stakes formative assessment world?
That seems to be the consensus in the guide, yeah. Formative assessment and adaptive learning environments are where AI can probably make the biggest positive impact right now, supporting learning without those high-stakes pressures.
Okay, let's dive into that then. Personalized and flexible formative assessment. The guide paints this picture of AI as a personalized digital learning companion. Sounds futuristic.
It does, but the potential is really exciting. Imagine an AI that kind of travels with the learner through their whole career, understanding their specific needs, strengths, weaknesses.
And providing continuous, low-stakes feedback and guidance.
Exactly. Tailored formative assessments, adaptive challenges, feedback tuned just for them. That's the vision.
What educational ideas underpin this?
Self-regulated learning, SRL, is key. The idea that learners need timely, specific feedback to monitor their own progress, figure out what they need to work on, and adjust how they study. AI is potentially great at providing that kind of feedback loop.
Can you give some practical examples? How is this actually being used?
Sure. People are building custom AI models to generate MCQs targeted at a student's weak spots. There are AI-driven virtual patients that get harder or easier based on how the learner is doing.
Like active learning,
Yeah,
essentially.
right. And AI analyzing written work or simulation performance to give very specific feedback points. Appendix 3 in the guide has a bunch of concrete tool examples like Gradescope, Blabster, Quizlet, Socratic by Google.
Lots of tools emerging. But are there challenges here too, even in low-stakes formative stuff?
Oh yeah, consistency is one. Ensuring the AI feedback is fair and equitable across all learners. Making sure the criteria are applied reliably.
And workload for faculty, does it really reduce it?
It's a mix. It can automate some things, but faculty still need to design the prompts, oversee the AI, integrate the feedback, maybe handle complex nuances the AI misses. And, AI feedback might lack that human touch, that empathetic understanding sometimes.
Good points. Okay, let's talk about a specific assessment casualty, maybe. The take-home essay. AI really threw a wrench in that, didn't it?
It really did. The essay was traditionally valued for developing higher-order thinking, synthesis, argumentation, aligning with Bloom's higher levels constructivism.
But then ChatGPT came along.
Right. Suddenly you had a tool that could produce plausible, often hard-to-detect essays, undermining the essay's validity as a measure of individual learning and understanding.
And the reactions were varied.
All over the map. Outright bans on AI, demanding handwritten work, rushing to use AI detection software.
Which we already said is problematic.
Exactly. And the guide argues that in the midst of this panic, maybe we lost sight of the purpose of the essay, which is assessing learning, not just the act of writing itself.
So if AI can write it, the traditional format doesn't work for assessment anymore.
That's the core problem. It makes tutoring easy and often undetectable. But just banning AI isn't helpful either, because learners will use these tools in their future professional lives. They need to learn to use them ethically and effectively.
It's a real bind. What about tech solutions, like special writing software that tracks AI use?
The guide mentions those, but notes limitations cost. They can often be tricked, and potential ethical or privacy concerns about that level of surveillance.
So what's the pedagogical answer then, according to the guide?
Embrace it, but rethink it. Shift the focus. Instead of seeing the essay as the sole product, maybe it's one part of a multimodal assessment, the learner acts more like a director.
A director? How so?
Using AI tools strategically to create various outputs, maybe some text, but also maybe a video script, an audio summary, a presentation outline, all demonstrating their grasp of the material and their ability to manage the AI tools effectively.
Interesting. So the assessment focuses on the learner's process and critical use of AI, not just the final text.
That's the idea. Acknowledging AI's presence, but designing assessments that still gauge genuine understanding and higher level skills.
This obviously leads to thinking about other assessment types beyond the essay. MCQs, short answers.
They have limitations too, right? Especially for higher order thinkers.
They do. They often struggle to assess complex reasoning or mimic real-world problem solving. So the push is to design assessments that, one, are harder to just cheat on using Gen AI, and two, actually leverage AI's capabilities in meaningful ways.
How do you do that? Make it more like real life. Sort of. Designing tasks where learners have to figure out what information they need, what skills to apply, mimicking the ambiguity and constraints of actual clinical practice. This aligns well with constructivism learning, by doing authentic tasks, and universal design for learning, UDL, which emphasizes relevance and authenticity.
So what are some examples of these alternative assessments using Gen AI?
The guide gives several: an annotated portfolio, where AI might help summarize or provide feedback; virtual patience, where AI creates scenarios, generates results, simulates conversations, and gives feedback;
We talked about virtual patients a bit already. Any others?
creating an infographic or a poster AI could help with outlining design ideas, maybe generating images, giving feedback on clarity. Appendix 4 has more examples too.
Okay. What are the best practices for designing these?
Key things are: mirror real-world tasks, focus on those higher-order skills AI can't easily replicate alone. Be super clear about how and when Gen AI is permitted or even encouraged.
Like for brainstorming or editing or as a tutor?
Exactly. Aligning with institutional policies and professional norms. And using rubrics that explicitly include criteria related to responsible AI use, like documenting how it was used, critically evaluating the AI output. There's even a mnemonic mentioned: how to use AI responsibly every time.
Sounds like a plan. But these sound potentially time-consuming to create.
They can be, yes. Design and implementation take effort. Learners might resist unfamiliar formats initially, and you still have issues of bias, equity, like access to paid versus free AI tools, and the need for educators to really explain the value and limitations of Gen AI to everyone, including administrators.
Okay, shifting focus again, AI as a tutor. We touched on this with formative assessment, but let's dig deeper. Why is AI potentially so powerful here?
Well, providing really good, personalized, fair, formative assessment consistently is incredibly resource-intensive for humans, right?
Definitely, especially in large classes.
So AI, particularly through intelligent tutoring systems, or IT, offers a way to scale that personalization and adaptivity. ITIS can tailor activities, adjust difficulty, automate feedback.
Making self-regulated learning more feasible.
Exactly. And potentially even predicting which students might struggle. They provide frequent, real-time feedback, analyze patterns of errors, and can reduce cognitive load by presenting information effectively.
How do they actually guide the learning process?
They use data from the learner's interactions to make decisions, maybe offering a different explanation, suggesting a prerequisite topic, providing a hint, or deciding the learner is ready for a harder challenge. It's about facilitating understanding and reflection.
Does the educator still play a role?
Oh, absolutely. Effective ITS design relies heavily on the educator's pedagogical content knowledge, knowing the subject, knowing how students learn it, and knowing how to teach it effectively. AI can also help manage peer feedback processes in large groups.
And virtual patients fit in here too.
Yes, as a specific type of ITS for clinical skills. They simulate those authentic interactions, letting learners practice reasoning and communication with tailored feedback. The guide mentions examples like a virtual operative assistant or the AI patient actor.
Can educators create simpler versions themselves?
Apparently, yes. The guide mentions using custom GPTs to build relatively straightforward ITS for interactive dialogue, concept clarification, maybe even basic bias reduction checks. They offer potential for scalability and multilingual support too.
What are the limits of AI tutors, though? Can they really replace human interaction?
Not fully, no.
Hmm.
Current AI can't capture the full spectrum of human emotion, subtle cues, or the sheer unpredictability of real patient encounters. So they're great supplements, but not replacements for real clinical experience. Plus, data privacy is always a concern, and AI peer assessment is still quite new.
Okay, now the flip side. AI as a learner, what does that mean?
It's kind of using AI as a more knowledgeable other, like Vygotsky talked about, but not just giving answers. AI can help frame discussions, maybe challenge learners' assumptions.
Creating that cognitive dissonance that sparks deeper thinking.
Exactly. Prompting learners to recognize gaps or inconsistencies in their understanding, encouraging them to elaborate and explain their reasoning more fully.
How would that look in practice?
Chatbots could generate summaries or different perspectives on a topic for learners to debate. AI could enhance collaboration tools, maybe acting as a facilitator in group work.
Simulating patient consultations, too.
Yeah, where the AI gives feedback on both the medical knowledge and the communication approach. Or even setting up AI LLMs to argue different sides of a clinical case, forcing learners to analyze the arguments critically.
Interesting ways to stimulate thinking. Best practices here.
Training is crucial. Both learners and faculty need to know how to use AI critically. Don't just accept its output. The guide mentions ChatGPT's performance on the USMLE as evidence of potential.
But emphasizes the need for critical evaluation.
Absolutely. And the major limitation, always, is that AI can't replace real interaction with human teachers, peers, and especially patients. There's a risk of developing bad habits or shallow thinking if you rely too heavily on chatbots.
Right. Okay, let's connect this back to competency-based assessment, CBE. Remind us what that is again.
CBE, or OBE, outcomes-based education, is all about ensuring learners achieve specific, defined competencies, the knowledge, skills, attitudes needed for practice. Assessment focuses on authentic tasks that reflect real work.
But it's hard to implement in busy clinical settings.
It can be, yeah. That's where the core components framework comes in. Again, clear outcomes, progression, tailored learning, focused instruction, programmatic assessment.
And AI might help with some of those components.
The guide suggests 3 areas look particularly promising. One is tailoring learning experiences. AI recommending resources based on assessed competency gaps, like a Netflix recommendation.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Competency-focused instruction. AI could potentially summarize feedback conversations or analyze simulation data to give faculty insights into learner needs, maybe supplementing human observation.
And third?
Programmatic assessment. AI could help analyze all the assessment data collected over time, flag learners ready for promotion or those needing support, saving faculty review time.
Sounds potentially very useful. Caveats or best practices?
Well, it's still early days for AI in actual HPE assessment implementation. Developing good tools needs careful use of educational data. Learners should be involved. Transparency is key. We need to evaluate the quality rigorously.
And avoid focusing just on easy-to-measure stuff.
Right. And critically, human oversight is vital for any high-stakes decisions based on AI analysis. Plus, ethical concerns about data use and equity remain.
That leads us nicely into the next big section, navigating difficult areas and ethical issues. AI clearly creates challenges.
Huge challenges. Assessors are grappling with widespread student AI use. University policies often lag behind the tech or aren't specific enough for HPE.
And the list of ethical concerns is long.
Yes. Source information is one. How Gene AI models are trained on vast amounts of data, often without consent or credit. That's ethically murky.
Bias is another big one, right?
Massive. If the training data is biased, the AI's output, whether it's assessment questions or feedback, can perpetuate discrimination. We need clarity on how learner data itself is used to train models, too.
What about faculty using AI? Any ethical pitfalls there?
Transparency again. Learners should know if AI is assessing them. Should they be able to opt out? Privacy concerns if NLP models analyze student writing. Institutions need licenses or APIs that protect data. And faculty must validate AI outputs for accuracy. Assessment appeals processes might need updating too.
And the whole AI detection thing.
The guide really cautions against it. Inaccuracy, bias, discourages potentially good uses of AI. It's generally seen as unreliable.
So the focus shifts to responsible learner use.
Yes, clearer policies are needed. Shared understanding, modeling accountability, guarding against gaming the system, ensuring equitable access training, licenses, hardware, and preventing over-reliance that stunts skill development.
It feels like institutions are playing catch-up with policy.
They absolutely are. It's tough to keep pace. Sharing best practices for handling educational data is crucial. The future is uncertain. AI is changing fast.
Beyond just waiting for artificial general intelligence.
Right. Even current AI requires us to adapt now. The guide stresses a strong ethical imperative to actively manage this change, ensuring HPE assessment stays relevant and effective.
Which brings us to faculty and staff development. That seems absolutely essential.
Non-negotiable, really. If we want AI integrated well, faculty need support. It's change management. And historically, faculty development for tech-enhanced learning has often been lacking.
So we need to build competence, using TPACK again.
Yeah, TPACK provides a great framework. Faculty need the basic tech knowledge, TK, how to use the tools, then tech content knowledge, TCK, using them in specific clinical contexts, tech pedagogical knowledge, TPK, using them to enhance teaching approaches.
And finally, TTCK integrating it all.
Exactly. Addressing confusion about when and how to use G&I ethically is vital, making sure faculty and learners have access to the tools, being explicit about use, encouraging discussion.
How do you actually do this development? Workshops, online modules?
A mix is probably best. Microlearning for quick updates. Communities of practice, COPs, for sharing experiences. Modeling AI use in other training. Sharing wins and failures. Maybe longer courses for deeper dives.
And acknowledging people have different comfort levels.
Crucial. Recognizing different affinities for tech, different risk tolerance, Having open conversations about assumptions around AI and thinking about support at the micro, meso, and macro levels, individual department institution.
Okay, last major point from the guide. Acknowledging and citing AI. If everyone's potentially using it, how do we handle that?
It's a tricky, evolving area, especially with things like the essay changing. Do you cite AI like an author, or is it just a tool?
What are the arguments?
One side says AI content needs citation to avoid plagiarism. The other says AI isn't human, can't be an author, its output isn't always retrievable or perfectly reproducible, so citation doesn't quite fit.
So what's the practical advice for now?
Look at institutional policies first. Many are developing them. And check what academic publishers are doing. They're often leading the way.
And what are publishers generally saying?
Most require acknowledgement or disclosure of AI use for transparency. You need to be specific. What tool, when, how much, for what task. Use precise language created with AI, edited using AI.
And for actual citations.
The adapted styles are emerging, treating AI like personal communication or software. APA style, for example, might look like author like OpenAI, year version, title like ChatGPT, date used version identifier, e.g. May 5 version, clarifying it's a large language model and providing the URL.
So specific formats are developing, but it's still in flux.
Definitely. Policies and best practices are still adapting. Staying updated is key.
Wow, okay, that was a comprehensive journey through AME Guide 178. Let's try to summarize the big takeaways. AI is clearly a massive force in HPE assessment.
Huge. It demands we rethink pedagogy, consider human reactions carefully, and find that tricky balance between personalizing learning and maintaining necessary standards.
It shows huge promise, especially for formative assessment, adaptive learning, maybe creating new, more authentic assessment types.
But the ethical challenges are significant, and faculty development is absolutely critical to making it work effectively and responsibly.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. As AI keeps accelerating, how do our fundamental ideas about competence and assessment in healthcare need to shift?
Yeah. How do we ensure future professionals are not just knowledgeable, but also really adept, critically adept, at using these incredibly powerful tools ethically and effectively in a healthcare world that's changing just as fast?
That's definitely something to chew on. We really encourage you, our listener, to reflect on how all this might impact your own work or learning. And if you want the full detail, absolutely check out the AME Guide No. 178 itself.
It's packed with insights.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.